let's look at the next thing. Which are the projects that are most hard hit and which of them are most resilient during the bad times? What are the results if we look at this in the last 10 years? This is an article in Straits Times 2009, January. It actually have chosen 10 condo projects in Singapore to look at the last transaction price versus the highest transaction in 2017. And they find out that which projects actually prices have fallen the most. They are the one in the prime districts. The examples given here are King Hill, Quest, and Newton Streets, which prices have fallen 25 to 26%. But those that have just dropped 5%, who are they? They are the owners of Tanning Regency and the Seaview. If you know, the Seaview is a freehold project, and just TOP at the time, just during TOP, maybe that's the reason why it only dropped 5%. Tanning Regency is a location I'm very familiar with because I bought Tanning View just next to Tanning Regency. It's in Alexandra Road, but it's just at the back of the Tanning district. Location is very good, and the tenancy is always very good and very resilient. So I remember my rental return hasn't dropped much, even during the financial crisis at that time. That's the reason why it only dropped 5% during the crisis. So next time when you buy, do remember location is most important, and whether you have a good resident profile and good rental return will determine whether the prices will drop, will be resilient or hard hit during the bad times. Let's look at non-landed private home prices, excluding EC, from the quarters of Q1 2007. I'm just looking at 4 quarters because this from Q1 to Q4 2007, it actually increased the most during these 4 quarters. Compare with from Q1 from the peak, drop all the way these 5 quarters, all the way to Q1 2009. From these 5 quarters, we compare with the previous 4 quarters. As you see that, Core Central region actually increased the most and dropped the most. That means whoever who jump up prices jump up the most actually drops the most. And if you see the Outer Central region actually doesn't increase that much, and it also doesn't drop much, like 15% over the next 5 quarters during the subprime crisis. Of course, you have to take into consideration the on-board deals for the CCR region during 2007 as well. What about in 10 years' time? This is a transaction trend of non-landed private homes for 10 years' time from 2009 to 2019. So I'm comparing by districts again, by regions again. So you see the CCR actually increased 55.4%, versus if you look at OCR and RCR, it increased 69.8% and 90.2% respectively, which is much more impressive during the last 10 years. So if you have bought property and then you have bought in RCR in the last 10 years, the return is much, much higher than properties that you bought in CCR at the time. Okay, this is just now talking about by region. This is leasehold or freehold. So we've looked at all the sales transactions in the last 10 years for non-landed private homes. We compared leasehold, that's 99 and 103 and 99 years, versus freehold or 999 year. You'll notice that very obvious, the performance of leasehold properties, there's a blue color line over here, return is higher, 77.29%, much higher than 60% in freehold properties. I always believe that if you want to invest in property in Singapore, leasehold properties much more preferred than freehold. You don't have to, your capital investment, it's not that high, but you'll be able to get much better return if you are renting it out because your tenants don't care whether it's freehold or leasehold. Another thing is that statistics show us that leasehold properties increase much higher over time compared with freehold properties. Okay, what about other quarters besides residential? We look at private residential units, office, and shops. That's also called retail right now. At the end of fourth quarter 2009. So we compare 3rd quarter and 4th quarter. Why I choose this quarter? Because that's the time when it's after the worst of the market. So when prices are going to come up is in fourth quarter 2009. So if you notice that the vacancy rate of private residential units is 6.2%, offices is 12%, and retail shop space is 6%, which is not much different from what we have last quarter, actually, by coincidence. So that tells us that if you invest in residential properties, vacancy rate is not that high. Why? Because in any market, good or bad times, good market or bad market, you still can find tenants. But during bad times, offices, if you can't rent out, you can't rent out. So that's why vacancy can be very high. So we'll take note of that. Some people say that we cannot go back to 10 years ago for the prices. Who said this? You know, in Hong Kong, it's just like this month, they come up with an article saying that in Central, that is the Central CBD area, that's called Queen's Road Central, the prices of the shops have dropped 60%. This is a cosmetic shop, and then rental have dropped 60%. Now it goes back to 10 years ago. That means 10 years ago, the rent is the same as now. Remember, I bought the dog court in 2003. So I was doing renovation there, and then a gable neighbor came to ask my purchase price. And after that, he found out that the purchase price is the same as he bought the same property 20 years ago when it first launched in 1983. Who said prices cannot go back 10 years or 20 years back? Things you don't know doesn't mean they don't exist. Things that you can't predict doesn't mean that it won't happen. So always remember this. So what is the property market 10 years after the 2009 financial crisis? Have you learned our lessons? You know, the 10-year challenge is also called how hard did aging hit you challenge. Of course, in Singapore, we have this how hard will aging fast hit you challenge. This happens after 2017 when our Minister Lawrence Wong tells us that actually not all HDB flats are eligible for SERPs. In fact, only 80 sites or 4% of HDB flats in Singapore that have gone through the SERPs. So at the end of the list, you know, the LHDB flats, after expiring of the list, will return back to the government. That started the old HDB flat owners, how hard will aging flats hit you challenge. I've taken the next two charts from urbanzoom.com, which is a very good developer on big data in property market. They find out that all else being equal, HDB flats depreciate on average of 0.67% per year for the last 4 decades. First 9 years, depreciation close to 0, but 10 to 25 years, depreciate 12%. 26 to 37 years, 21%. If it's older than 38 years, too bad. It will depreciate 28%, even if you do nothing about it. So it sits there, you live there, it will depreciate over time. So you see how aging flats will hit the owners. That is the challenge. The next challenge that we have is how hard will aging in Singapore hit housing challenge. Look at this chart. It is the age distribution of residents in Singapore. So most of us are actually in this 35 to 39 all the way to 55 or 59, these age groups. So this is diminishing, and this, of course, passing away. So what will happen after 10 to 20 years' time? So the chart will move more and more to the right, right? We'll move more and more to the right. Most of us in 20 years' time will be in our 59-year, that kind of bracket or above. That is a bit scary because 80% of Singapore population will stay in HDB. So who is going to take up our HDB flats? Because we are still launching new BTO flats, 15,000 every year for our new generation. So when we grow old, when we are no longer there, when people older than us are no longer there, who are going to take over their old HDB flats? Is it the PRs or the foreigners? Look at this. This is population of foreigners in Singapore, 1998 to 2018. If you notice that, what is E? Of course, it's election year, very obvious, right? No need to explain. notice that the number of foreigners increased the most after the 2006, that time all the way to 2010. Do you see that? These are the years that our number of foreigners increased the most. We kind of level off or even drop in the recent 2 to 3 years. Do you notice that? So if you are not granting new PR, we are not importing new foreigners who are going to take up our homes in HDB and our private homes, who are going to rent it, who are going to buy it. Okay, so we have this aging population or population challenge in the next 10 years. So this year marks the 10 years anniversary of the 2009 financial crisis. So what have we learned so far? So I want you to go back and ask yourself a few questions. Do you find that you have more confidence to buy or invest in the Singapore property market compared with 10 years ago? The new launch projects, do you think that they offer better designs and layouts compared with 10 years ago? We have this CEA, Council of Estate Agents, set up in October 2010, trying to regulate and license our real estate industry and the property agents. But do you have more trust in your property agents compared with 10 years ago? Again, do you think our media report, the property news, are they more trustworthy compared with last time? Compared to last time, do we have better access to all the news, data, insights, analysis, or analysis tools that we need? Do you think Singaporeans are more satisfied in general about their housing? Okay, let's talk about housing environment, not housing policy, because too sensitive. So we talk about Singaporeans more satisfied with their housing environment. Is it compared with 10 years ago? Okay, you can take photo here and go back and think about these questions. So I find out lately there are a lot of people who are selling their ideas exactly 10 years ago what they're selling. You know, nothing has changed. How to own multiple properties with no money down, still build. How to fully utilize or monetize from your fully paid off HDB flats and buy 2 private properties, even more silly. People who are curious about it, they don't use their brain at all, because we already busted the myth 10 years ago, isn't it? Why we come back with the same thing again? So that's why I'm working with Mr. Khoo Swee Yong, who is the most honest person in the industry, to tell people, if you want to really invest in a property, you should learn some honest, real skills to do it. You should know how to analyze key data to make better property investment decisions. It doesn't matter whether you want to buy local, which property sector you want to buy. You want to buy local, you want to buy overseas, you want to do any type of property investment. You need to know what type of data to invest. And you need to know how to evaluate profitability and risk of any options that are given to you based on the economic and financial needs. Another thing is, the most important thing is how to value and finance your property using all the methods available, how to be able to do it. And then we're going to do a lot of exercises, exams to make sure that you know how to do it. Okay, so we will evaluate all the investment potential and calculate the cash return, the cash flow, how to finance property investment, and how to put this into practice. So I think at least you can do something like this, rather than go and attend a seminar to teach you how to own multiple properties with no money down. Okay? That goes the end of my presentation. So thank you very much for, you have been a very kind audience.